And on today's episode, what I want to talk about is how we have both found our way into a deeper connection with our own truth, with our own individual authenticity, and how that has really helped both of us connect to each other in a much deeper and more intimate way of relating to each other. And, really to start out because it's always important to us that we are bringing our authentic selves to our podcast and to the content we're creating. Like on a day like today, we're recording this podcast. You are very deep in your luteal phase of your cycle, which is a very low energy place for you and really for a woman to be. And we always want to honor you and where you are and how you are. And we're also recording a podcast. So, I want to start out with just the permission for you to show up in this recording with whatever it is that you have to bring.
It definitely is um, a phase of my cycle that I've had to really lean into acceptance on. But I've also really come to appreciate the introspection and the loving being more alone during this time. And yeah, it's really, despite the physical lower energy and maybe not feeling as filled with desire to be around other people, there really is beautiful aspects of it too. And we go through it for a reason. But like obviously like today, we're doing this podcast early in our day, and I will be chilling out after in some sunshine.
And it's a part of what helped me start to accept and understand more of you and accept more of you, and then I guess give more permission for you just to be who you are and how you're feeling on any given day. Because an older version of me would have felt like something was wrong on a day like today.
Me too.
2 weeks ago you were so bubbly and effervescent, and then today you are so, like, just, I'm not using this as term judgmentally, but you're very flat. Like,
Thank you. I would call it chill.
chill, but your energy is just very level. It's low and it's level. And
Somewhat. I was really giggly this morning.
you were.
It's different.
And, almost 4 years ago when I started keeping track of your cycle, I started to learn a lot about how you naturally change throughout any given throughout any given 29-ish day cycle on a day-to-day basis, and how dramatically you shift and change. And being able to see that really helped me bring acceptance to it rather than chasing you around like something was wrong when your energy was lower, to accept, oh, this is kind of how it is this at this particular phase of your cycle.
And your acceptance of it was even more of a permission for me to lean into the self acceptance because, like, part of what I, for lack of a better way to say it, need to focus on is not comparing myself to the other phases during
Mhm.
the month. and recognizing how in that follicular and ovulation time, I am just like, let's go get it, world. Like, let's do this. And I'm way more filled with desire to be around other people. Um, but all in all, the more I've come into my own authenticity, the more I've even experienced this phase of my cycle differently.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, acceptance, but and you pay a lot of attention to how you structure all of our time and how much we're going out versus staying home. Um, but even some of that has shifted for me. So I kind of fell into this almost hibernation phase, which is more like during your cycle or your bleed. But I feel like my tolerance is a lot more of other people's energies. It's just paying attention to what is that energy that I am around and also balancing it. Like I said, like we're here having this conversation. This is still really relaxed for me. Um, my energy probably is displayed quite differently, but even still, I will just chill out and lay with my eyes closed and listen to the birds for a while outside. And that just feels good to me in a different way than other times of the month.
And I love that we can come here and just, you can feel okay to be how you are and really display to other women that it's okay to let yourself be how you are on any given day.
Absolutely. Any amount of not is creating disharmony in your body. When you're not accepting the reality of what is real for you,
Mm-hmm.
you're telling yourself like you're bad almost. And the more that I've leaned into that acceptance, the more I feel like it's supported that harmony on a very deep level.
One of the things that I sought to do with this dominant submissive dynamic was to kill off places in our life where we were acting out of obligation. And that comes back to the whole point of what I want to talk about today is authenticity. Because if you're feeling low energy and you force yourself to go be in a higher energy than what you're feeling in that moment, the only thing you can be doing is you're acting out of obligation. You're acting because you think you're obligated to act or show up in a certain way, rather than honoring how you authentically feel in that moment. And then you're not being true to yourself. And that's always going to feel gross to me, and I think to any man who's emotionally tuned into his woman. If you are feeling one way and acting another way, it's just going to show. And we'll come back around to that, but where I want to start is authenticity as a concept. What was your relationship to the concept of authenticity, and how have you come to understand what that word means?
Going back to childhood, I don't even know if that really was used in our home. I doubt it. Like, and probably not in school because honestly, I don't think it was really in my vocabulary. And I don't know when I started hearing that word. It was probably you. My early years were all about trying to live perfectly, trying to do it right. You know, I've shared this before. Religion was a very prominent thing in my life. And so I was constantly trying to live to a standard and absorbing all of these belief systems that perpetuated black and white thinking. This is good, that's bad. This is right, that's wrong. Do this to get to heaven, this will send you to hell. Oh shit, right? And so there was no coming to know myself, who I truly was.
And for me, I always I had a very different relationship to it because I wasn't raised around so much black and white thinking. And my father in particular is a very go with the flow kind of guy, but he's also very much like okay being who he is.
Yeah.
He's very comfortable in his own skin, and I've always appreciated that about him. And so through him, I had authenticity modeled to me, even though I don't think he would have known what that meant or used that word. But there was a certain amount of like permission to just be who you are. And, I remember one of the first times that ever showed up for me where he reflected that permission to be myself back to me was when I was probably in about seventh grade and realizing that I didn't really want to play sports anymore. I wasn't really having fun with it. And I was more leaning towards wanting to do more related to music. And I remember on the ride to school one day, I was probably 12, 13. He's like, just do what you want to do. Yeah, I will. And like, I just remember that little moment. So I kind of had authenticity modeled to me as an okay way of being and going about life. Then I got to college and decided I was going to chase money and threw all that out the window for about 20 years in a lot of ways. But authenticity to me is really knowing who you are at your core, or at least living your life in pursuit of being more of who you are. But one of the ways I've said this to you as I started to teach this concept to you was, who would you have been if the world never got to you? If you hadn't been conditioned and programmed, what's your essence? And as I started to reflect acceptance back to you of whatever is real for you, whoever you truly are, not trying to do it right or wrong, but just being you, I know that started to turn some lights on for you.
Oh, yes. I've had to challenge like all of my belief systems, and I probably am not done yet. Because you don't like, until you experience things and keep living your life, you don't really know maybe certain belief systems that kind of were just there, or what memory gets triggered um, as you're going about life. But gosh, I got to a point where I kept feeling over and over like I was living a lie. Like, is everything about my life wrong? And not right or wrong, but just untrue. And looking back, no, now I don't feel that. Like, I believe there's truth and um, I'm just going to say realness. I mean, not everything that I experience in the world of religion is quote unquote bad or wrong. I mean, there's plenty of goodness,
Mhm.
love that has come through it. And I truly believe that, something I had kind of heard back in religion was it's a personal relationship with God. Well, that is not how it was displayed to me. But in that phrase, I can see a little bit of authenticity, a little bit about it's your relationship, even if that's not how it was displayed to me. And also, religion speaks about love, even if I still had to come to my own understanding around what love is and what it feels like in me and what it's like to give and receive. And no matter what your life experience is, now I see it as everybody needing to really tune into even the concept of love as an adult. And when I say adult, I just mean later in life because it requires life experience and relationships and a lot of self reflection to feel into what is the depths of love for me in my being authentically.
Yeah. And the search for authenticity really is, it's an inward search. And this is where the two different directions that dominance and submission can take kind of hit the fork in the road. If you think about it in these terms, like your soul is a seed that was planted and it's always trying to grow. There's like you have an essence, you have a nature. There are those things about you that have been the same all the way back to the time that you were a young child, that you still feel now, that are still true about you now. They're real. That's like the seed of authenticity that's planted inside of every one of us. But then as we grow up and we're told, don't do that, it's not okay to want this, that makes you bad. Or when that person did that, they were bad. Okay, well, I can't do that, then I'd be bad. And we start making all these beliefs and these meanings and these understandings of how we think the world works. And it's like we're throwing blankets over the top of that seedling that's trying to grow.
I wouldn't call them blankets. I would call them like something more substantial
Like
in my world,
grand pianos getting dropped on Wile E. Coyote.
like massive walls of concrete.
And yet all the time that seed of authenticity, that seed of truth of who you would have grown to be if it weren't for all of these beliefs is still, like, it still exists inside of every single one of us. And if we're going to pursue dominant submissive dynamics as a route to authenticity, to love, to live in a way of being this instead of doing it, then the pursuit together is the pursuit of finding those walls inside of each of us, those grand pianos, those blankets, whatever they are, finding them and lifting them off and getting rid of them to help bring us deeper into who we are, deeper, closer into that seed of truth of who I was born to be, who you were born to be. If we're not doing that, and instead we're saying like, do this, do that, follow this rule because I said so, then what we're doing is we're adding more grand pianos. We're putting more walls on top of that seed and going farther away from the truth, farther away from our essence. And in doing so, in going farther away from our essence, we are disconnecting ourselves more from who we are. And we're also then interacting with each other from a place of not even being ourselves. Because there was a place 5 years ago where we were at in our relationship, looking back at it now, it wasn't even me and you in that relationship. It was my walls and your walls that were talking to each other.
And trauma bonds.
Yeah. Well, that's the only thing you can bond with is your walls that were built out of trauma. They were built out of pain. They were built out of avoidance of pain. And that's all there is to bond to someone with.
And when I first started hearing that concept, I kind of looked at it as like, oh man, like that is awful. But it's really not. It just is how these things work. And as we've experienced the healing of that trauma bond, like the pain from you matching with the pain in me, and experiencing you healing, feeling the letting go of the pain, and me letting go of the pain, like it's been this like just beautiful, intimate journey together. And so I don't see it as anything but necessary in order to truly connect with what's underneath.
It
And
couldn't be anything else.
no, it can't. This kind of reminds me of last night over dinner. We enjoyed some steak and wine, and here's me all of a sudden crying because I recognized just a little piece of shame that I still felt over some of my own desires of not wanting to be in charge at all. That little thread. And I think along the way, you know, early us together, I've labeled it as unconscious survival mode.
Mhm.
And I had to come to some awareness. It was almost as if I had to come accept myself while being in this relationship as a self, as an individual. And it was like, oh, wow, I see things through such a new lens. Awareness. And I even called it like consciousness. But now I just call it awareness. And as we were like trauma bonded, and as I kind of like started to disentangle, it was like, oh, yeah, this is who I am, I think. Like, maybe, like, is this who I am? And all along this time, you were just learning and seeing me and reflecting so much truth to me. And I think somewhere along the way, it was almost as if I I allowed myself to uh, absorb some shame, but maybe it's been there. It doesn't really matter how long, of like just desiring to essentially do nothing. Like just be. And that doesn't mean I'm just sitting around doing nothing. I can't really describe what that all is, but literally just be okay being who I am and just being love to you without getting into what that all looks like. And so I just had this moment where I was crying because it just felt like it hit such a deep desire in me that I didn't even formulate for myself. It's just there. It was like literally feeling the innocence connecting in such a deeper level. of that inner little girl. Like I saw myself. And again, it like authenticity, that innocence, that's what really feels real to me.
Yeah, and along like all of this journey, I've been watching you and seeing you, and this is a part of the role of the masculine, of the dominant, of the man, is to be connected enough to my own consciousness that I can see you. And this is probably the point where I need to talk a little bit about this, because as you go deeper, as we've gone deeper into our own individual authenticity, you're going to get down at a certain point to, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Because that's a part of your authenticity.
Right. I sure hope you get there at least.
And those questions are closer down to that seed of truth, to that seed of your soul, your purpose, your essence. Because our essence is very intimately connected to our expression.
I have truth goosebumps covering my body right now.
So what it means to be a man is very intimately tied up for me with what it means to be who I am. And in some respects, there is a thread of truth that runs through what it means to be a man across men. But then there is a very different individual, authentic expression of that in every single soul and person. And the same thing with being a woman.
Right.
There are certain threads of truth that are going to run true between what it means to be a woman for all women. But then you have your own individual essence. So as we seek authenticity, as we seek being in the expression of not just what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, because that's still too broad. It's not individual. Authenticity is individual. It's unique. And it's inconvenient because it doesn't fit into boxes or labels or ideologies or identities that blend in. It doesn't fit into groups. It's just one. And part of the reason that people don't seek authenticity is because it's lonely in some respects.
At this point in the world, it definitely seems that way.
Because it's not displayed as an okay way to be. We're supposed to pick the group that we belong to. We're supposed to pick the ideology with which we align. But as soon as we identify with a group, we've thrown our individuality away, because now I'm one of these people. But no one totally, completely aligns with all of the beliefs of the group, because groups don't exist. Groups are made up of individuals. So, we live in a world and a society where what's shown to us is you belong to groups. You're a part of um, this thing or that thing, this political thing, whatever. And the individual is the smallest minority. I've heard it said that way. And nobody else stands up for the individual because it's just a party of one.
Yeah, I do think some of that just stems from our need to have community, our need to feel like we belong and acceptance. And there can be a unwritten, what would be the word? Maybe undefined acceptance that you feel when it's like, oh, maybe it's religion or politics. It's like, I believe these, and so now I'm going to be here. And now it's, it almost, it's trying to fill that void of needing to be accepted and belong and have that community. But it's also not completely it.
And it never will be. The the real challenge in any seeking of authenticity is how you balance this real human need for connection and to belong with the fact that you are really just an individual. You are not, like, nobody else owes you a damn thing. Nobody else owes you a friendship or a relationship or love or affection or anything else. And you, at least for me, starting to move towards authenticity meant moving away from a lot of those places that I had those needs met, where I was showing up as a different version of myself than who I really was. When I started showing up more as myself, I wasn't welcomed there anymore. I wasn't wanted there anymore because I didn't fit in with them anymore.
Were those things really meeting your needs, or was it more like chasing for the need to be filled?
If I really tuned into it, I would have, now looking back, I would say, yeah, I was trying to get that need met, but there was always something lacking in it. And I think that's a lot of why our world is so messed up right now, because people are trying to find something real in all of this identity, ideology. They're trying to find something solid, and it's just not there. But because of how we work as humans and how these egos work, we keep going farther away from our own individual authenticity to seek to get those needs met rather than turning around and going inward.
And I think a big one is just looking externally for the validation. I know Gabor Mate in his book speaks about that. And I listened to him on a few different podcasts and how he spoke that, he had this need to be validated. He's like, so what did I do? Become a doctor because, like, everybody needs a doctor. Like, what's not better than getting that external validation on a daily basis? But who wasn't getting him was his family because he was working so much. And that really stood out to me because of even looking back at my life and constantly seeking someone else's essentially opinion
Mhm.
for me. I didn't look at it as opinion. I kind of elevated it on a pedestal as like truth, and you know me better than I know myself because, well, geez, if I need something from a doctor, you must know what you're talking about because you went to school for it and I didn't. Where eventually I got to the point of realizing, huh, I'm at the whim of how that person absorbed everything that they were taught. And plus, it still is missing some of the points of our actual bodily emotional experience of the world. So, anyway, I knew firsthand of constantly seeking how to live, how to do it right, how to do all these things out there. There was nothing about inside. I was deeply disconnected.
So this, what this becomes and has become for us is a turning inward and really looking underneath all of the stuff, all of those identities, all of the things that we thought we were, both of us, and recognizing, okay, that's not actually who I am. That was a thing that I did, or a group I belonged to, or something that I was trying to do to get validated and get a need met, but it wasn't really me.
Mm-hmm.
And so this seeking for authenticity can also become a very deeply individualistic seeking of separateness. Like it separates us from others, from the world, from all of the ways that we entangled ourselves with things that weren't really us. And that is where dominance and submission, or conscious relating, divine union, use whatever words you want to use to describe this, that is where this helps us find really true, deep, intimate connection. Because when we do this together, in alignment with our own authenticities, with what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, we bring acceptance of that and we do it together. And I lead you through it so you don't have to lead yourself through it. Then we that's where authenticity has really brought us to a kind of connection that's different than what we experience really anyone else that we know or have seen experiencing, because we're doing this separately together.
Right. Kind of going back to what I was sharing earlier. I don't think I fully made my point, but it's appropriate now. Um, is that like you said, like becoming separate?
Mm-hmm.
So, like along my journey, I kind of I realized I needed to create this individuality because I was so tied up in all of these different ideologies and belief systems that weren't my own.
You realized that you didn't know who you were,
Hmm.
that everything you were and what you were showing up as was just what other people wanted you to be.
Right. And so I really felt lost, um, to a certain degree, but still, I had you along the whole way and I trusted you. But you also gave me the freedom to sit with things for myself. And we had a lot of conversation around different belief systems that I had. And I was willing to challenge things even when it felt extremely uncomfortable. And wow, have some of them felt extremely uncomfortable to challenge. Still working through some of them.
We both are.
um, but then, like, the farther, the more belief systems I started pulling off of myself and accepting, like, you know what? I really don't have to care about X or Y or Z. I can just let that be, and I don't have to be like, this is right about that, this is wrong. And so the more I accepted the gray areas of life and just, I don't exactly know, again, the more I just felt this like innocence. It's as if my innocence was a puzzle. And as soon as I entered the world, it was like, destroy the puzzle. And now it's in all of these fragments inside of me. And now I have to figure out how to put it back together. And so as these puzzle pieces have started to align themselves again inside of me, I've connected with the deeper desires that, again, they don't feel like I formulated them from belief systems. It literally feels like something innately in me. And that's where this surrender and submission and union, those desires truly feel like they are necessary in order for me to actually be in my fullest authentic expression. It's where I feel like I need you deeply.
And authenticity really, the when people recognize that everything about them has just been what other people thought of them and how they showed up in order to be accepted and to be validated and to be loved and to get the needs of their ego met. When people wake up to that fact and start to see it, and they start to come back inward, right? Because they're not running away from themselves anymore to try to get their needs met.
Mm-hmm.
They turn around and start looking inward to try to get back to meeting their own needs and just being okay with who they are and how they are and what they are. This shift happens from what I'll call codependency, where for me to be okay, I'm trying to fix everything in the world around me,
Mm-hmm.
like a codependent relationship with life, where I need life to be okay for me to be okay. There's a shift that happens out of codependency into independence. And that's what you were getting at with your beginning of journey, where you started to shift out of where, for example, you pedestalized me in a way that was really just a negation of yourself and put too much of emphasis on me and making sure that I was okay so that you felt okay and got validation and got the things you needed. Right? So that's that codependent relationship with each other, but it also shows up and showed up for you across the full spectrum of life.
Yeah, I came last. I didn't matter. Oh, those were more tears. I treated myself like I didn't matter.
So the shift then becomes, oh, individuality.
Mm-hmm.
I have an essence. I am just me. I'm not who everybody thinks I am. I'm not even who I think I am.
That was a stage of mourning for me. Like
Yeah.
I felt like I was grieving the loss of who I thought I was.
And that's an important shift for both men and women alike, is that shift inward where you stop looking outside of yourself and you start looking inward. But that's where it stops for a lot of people,
Yeah.
is it goes to this seeking of independence, of authenticity for me, by me, for me. And then it ends up, if you're trying to have a relationship with another person, you end up being these two separate pillars where you can start to sow the seeds of disconnection from each other by going away from each other back into yourself, which is why it can't just stay there if you want intimacy, if you want connection. So, and that is what dominance and submission has been for us, and what it continues to be is the final piece of that puzzle, which is the journey out of codependency towards independence, authenticity, individuality, into depending on each other. And that's what terrifies most people about authenticity. Like they can do independence, like they can feel okay going, like starting to unwind the belief systems that have them codependent with life, if they can come back to a place where they're in charge of their own reality. But then what becomes inevitably true, I think, if you are a masculine or a feminine being, is that the more you come into your authenticity, the more you realize you need something from your opposite, from the other side of things. Otherwise, it just becomes depolarized. It becomes very independent, probably very safe. This is the monk on the mountaintop who just meditates all day, but there's no passion. There's no excitement, aliveness, sexual energy, eros. Like, we need each other for that. And frankly, I think people are terrified of depending on someone else.
Well, I will say it's exposing yourself in a way that is really challenging and uncomfortable to the ego. And it's where the questions that we've got before is like, aren't you afraid of losing him? No, I'm not going to live in that fear. Is it reality that it could happen? Yes, but focusing on it doesn't change anything. And it actually keeps me from the depths of intimacy that I can have with you when I don't succumb to that fear.
It's funny, though, that no one ever asks me if I'm afraid of losing you.
Isn't that interesting?
It's never been asked once.
Very true. Well, in the typical look at dominance and submission, it's looking like the submissive is the one who needs the dominant, not the other way around. But where, like, we've experienced this dependency and not codependency, it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only a felt thing. And this is where I feel like the word union really comes into play. I think this is what marriage really was intended, the word marriage, just the way I see it now, of what really can exist when two become one.
Yeah. And there again, two becoming one, there has to be some individuality. There has to be two in order for two to become one.
Right.
And that's what this journey to authenticity is really about, is coming into our separateness. We talk about polarity like this, like it exists on a continuum. And the farther we go apart from each other on that continuum, you into your feminine expression, me into my masculine expression, the more tension there is between us. It's not comfortable. Polarity is not a comfortable energy. It's an exciting energy. It's a passionate energy, but it's not a cute and cuddly. Like, this kind of intimacy we talk about is not just about being soft and and gentle. It's electric.
Yeah, and I can hear someone saying, well, I need the comfort, I want the safety. Um, if you focus on that, you can't have the other. But yeah, it's it's a felt experience. I don't even have words for it.
Well, what it is, I think, is this desire for comfort and safety is the fear of depending on someone, the fear of letting go of control showing up as a desire to eliminate fear.
Well, it could also be at its core the pure desire for a place to be your authentic self, but it requires work and effort, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it really could be coming from that.
Well, and there are different kinds of safety and comfort. the assumption, I think, a lot of times when people hear, yes, I want to feel safe, is that I want to exist in this place where everything feels okay all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at here is authenticity and
Mm-hmm.
union is a different kind of safety, because when we meet each other with this unconditional acceptance of our own individuality, our own identity or essence, and I tell you, you know what, you're okay for me, no matter how you are, as long as you are being you and you're being real. Like, the more you're being you, I tell you this frequently, the more of you that you're being, the more of you there is for me to love. And now the safety isn't in having to shrink down your expression to be comfortable. The safety is in that you can fly
Yes.
and be loved and appreciated and valued and accepted, and always know that you have a nest to come back to. And that's a different kind of safety.
Absolutely, it is.
And that's what I'm talking about here, because it's the same thing in the other direction. If you look at me and say, I accept you as you are, I want you to be all of who you are. And you say that to me, and now I can go conquer the damn world and not feel like I need to always be checking back and making sure you're not upset with me. Make sure I'm doing it okay, right?
Right.
Because that's how I showed up when I was in that codependent kind of expression for myself. It was always like I had to have one hand on you all the time to make sure that you were okay with how I was being.
Yep.
So, this is a different kind of safety. That's what I mean when I say it's not comfortable, but it's exciting and it feels solid.
Yeah. Real.
So, I want to tie this back around to dominance and submission, because a part of this seeking of authenticity for both of us has been the recognition of, at my core, at my essence, a piece of me is the masculine expression, what it means to be a man, to be in charge, to see the truth and try to bring my world into better alignment with that truth. And a big part of that has been, a massive part of that has been seeing the truth in you and helping to bring you into more alignment with who you are, not with who I want you to be, not with what I think you should be, but with who you are. And that's where I believe it is the dominance job, the masculine role, to see the feminine and lead her back to herself. Because if she's figuring things out for herself, if she's making her own plans, doing everything without some external masculine influence seeing into her, she can do that. But she's going to be at odds with her essence, with a part of her essence that is essentially the receptive nature of the feminine.
And I believe like I could have done some of this growth without you, but I could not get to where I am without you. There were certain pieces of myself that I would not be able to see without you, the masculine consciousness. I truly believe that.
Yeah. And that's where we've heard this statement that a part of the masculine role is initiation, it's leadership.
Mhm.
And so anything getting initiated, seen, and moved in a direction at all is coming from a masculine expression, period. And if that's in alignment, for me, like that's in alignment with my nature, with my essence, with who I am. It's in alignment with my authenticity because, well, here's how I know it is, because when I'm doing that, I feel fulfilled. I feel strong and solid. I don't feel burdened. I don't feel burned out by it. The more of that I can do, if I have the ability to bring life into alignment with how I think it should be and how I see it being true and right and real, I'm more and more fulfilled and filled up by that.
And I can't remember if we recently talked about this or not on something we recorded, but this concept, there's a lot of polarity talk and feminine and masculine energy and all of this. And, at the point that I'm at, I I don't think about, is this feminine or is this masculine? Am I in my feminine or am I in my masculine? The more that I've truly just surrendered, submitted to you, become more of who I am at my essence, I just feel like there's this natural flow into things. And of course, like you set our lives up intentionally in a certain way. So I'm not minimizing anything about the structure and order and all of that you create for us. But it's like when I've let go of those threads of life that I was trying to control, all of that just feels easier. Whether or not I'm doing something, it's not thinking. I don't feel exhausted in the same way, like from a workout. I'm going to go back there because that was my deep attachment. When I approach it with the energy that I feel like comes from that essence, that sexual essence that is naturally feminine in me, it doesn't feel exhausting to me in the same way that workouts did before. And so to me, like I've witnessed the shift even more recently in myself as I've continued to let go of there were so many threads to my fitness and nutrition. I still laugh at it, but it just is. It's just was my thing. And I don't know, like again, I don't know how else to say it. Maybe you have some words to describe this, but I don't, like I'm just living and being
Mm-hmm.
in what I'm doing. And I notice, well, I don't feel like things drain me like they used to. I just don't feel that.
And that is the piece that is my role. All of what you experience there, everything that's been able to shift, everything that you've been able to not think about all of this stuff so hard, not get so tied up in your head, not worry about it, not try to figure it out, exists in you because I took control. I dominated our lives in a way that took you out of all of the ways you used to run away from yourself, that you used to run away from your truth. And I set your life up and showed you, reflected to you who you really are. So that, you said you're not minimizing any of the ways that I set order and created structure in our lives, but it's the fact that I did that that just allowed you the space to be.
You're fucking awesome.
And so you existing in that space and just enjoying your life is feminine expression, it is submission, and it's allowed you to come more into connection with your authenticity.
Absolutely. And it feels easy. I'm not saying that I don't have things that feel confronting, but I know if something feels confronting, it actually is for me now. And you are my guide through it.
And that's one of the biggest reasons why we have to untangle the codependency.
Absolutely.
I have had to untangle the codependency that I had with you in order to be able to let you have the truth of your experience, because some of it would have been extremely confronting to a version of me that just thought submission was supposed to mean you did whatever I say.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want more than anything is to be able to be loved without obligation.
Yeah.
I want to feel desired by you because you actually desire me. And if you're operating out of any sort of obligation, if you're not connected to all of your authenticity, you're still fucking performing. You're live action role playing your life rather than being who you are.
And I would say that in the unconscious patterns, you're even performing love.
Mm-hmm.
You might not think it, but there is a certain performance to love. And, going back to my childhood and recognizing, looking back as an adult, realizing like I didn't actually feel my parents' love. It wasn't because they didn't love me. And there's this like, family, the definition of family and all of what that meant is something that I had to sit with and decide for myself. What is the truth here? Because I don't want obligation even in that. Oh, because I was your daughter because you are my mother, I have to be this way or I have to show this way or whatever it is. Like I really sat with a lot of those different things and allowed myself the space to do so. And I took however long I needed to and had the relationship that I needed to in order to come into my full authenticity, even in relationship to my family, whether that's my parents, my siblings, or my daughters. Um, but what I'm getting at is there's this like automation, like, of course you are supposed to love me as my mom, and like, you didn't because I didn't feel it. Well, no, actually, if you ask my mom, she's like, of course I love you. It was me who blocked the love. But also, when I truly started opening those walls to let you in, the love that I feel from you, you don't owe it to me. There's no obligation attached to it. Maybe there was because I looked at you as my husband and of course you're supposed to love me. But when I started looking at all of these different threads and dropping any of that obligation shit, I could truly connect with your pure love for me in who I am.
And from my side, it's felt like I don't have to try so hard anymore to break through to like feel like you feel my love. It's more like I feel your love for me because of who I am, not because of what I do. And again, any of these little threads of where obligation shows up in life and in relationship and in love, all of it has to die in order to find truth and to find authenticity. And, to really put a bow on this, I want to come back to something I said earlier about the depolarizing nature of authenticity seeking coming into individuality. There's a book that we've listened to together now a couple times called The Untethered Soul. And the last time we listened to it, I remember we were discussing after one of the chapters how this doesn't ever get any farther than individuality. And so that kind of work, that kind of authenticity work is important, but we have to go even deeper than that into our essences, into our souls, into our beings, and our ability to drop the walls and let love in and let it flow between us if we want to be able to be both in our authenticity and in love without being two separate pillars, like walking side by side but never in true connection. It's the ability to find authenticity that's required, but then it's the ability to surrender individuality while maintaining that authenticity and acceptance of each other's true natures and true essences without expectation, without walls, and without um, demands of performance, that really allows us to be in love, to be truly in love, because we are in love with who each other really is then, and we're loving each other from who we really are.
Oh, I was just brought back to a fear that came up in me as I was not creating, but like seeking this individuality. And I became afraid.
I remember this one.
I don't even know if I can say it. I was afraid that creating that individuality would actually lead me to believe submission wasn't for me and that it would lead me away from you. But I had to accept that, even that, in order to fully own the realness of it. And I had to walk into that fire.
Yeah, essentially, no. Essentially, what that was for you. I just want to put some words to this because I can see it's getting hard for you too, but I remember it very well because you shared it with me. When you were unwinding those codependent patterns, it felt like you were essentially walking away from me.
Yeah.
And you had to open yourself to the knowing that this seeking of your own individual essence and your own individual authenticity meant that it could end up leading you away from this marriage, this relationship, from this dominant submissive dynamic that we were exploring and enjoying. But it had to be real for you or it wasn't real at all.
There was a thread that I didn't think that would happen, but the fear was bigger
Mm-hmm.
than that. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep going.
And the lesson in that is that if for anything to be real, you have to be willing to let go of it. You have to be willing to walk away from anything, to question everything. If you're not questioning everything, you aren't at authenticity. You're still in performance. And that's going to confront, it's going to hurt, it's going to suck, it's going to be hard. It's going to feel like your whole life is getting turned upside down.
Oh, it did.
But that is the route to truth. And underneath all of this performance and all of this external identification, and back to a place where You can have an individuality from which you can come into a true, intimate container of love. And that conversation, I think, did a better job than we've ever publicly done at relaying the truth of what dominance and submission really has the potential to be. And for those of you still listening and watching an hour and 10 minutes into this, this is what we do, is we help people on their own journeys back to themselves, not by telling you what to do, but by showing you how to do it for yourself. And so we really do appreciate you and value you. And we thank you for being here and listening and watching. And we would love to hear from you, your feedback on this episode, and any way that we can support you. It's what we do at Infinite Devotion, and we're very proud to do it. Thank you for listening and watching.
Thanks for being with us.